2,000 feet below the Arctic ice, 30 scientists are breathing air that is slowly being replaced by poison. The sensors on the multi-million-dollar Nautilus 9 report a perfect 100% oxygen level, but the AI is lying. Behind the steel panels, a silent electrical fire is eating the base's life support from the inside out. The crew is minutes away from falling into a sleep they'll never wake up from until a Siberian Husky named Koda smells a ghost in the vents. This is the story of the dog who had to break a high-tech fortress to save the humans trapped inside. Title: The Iron Lung, the Siberian Husky who smelled the vacuum. Chapter 1: The Abyssal Cage. Nautilus 9 was more than a research station, it was a titanium bubble of human arrogance sitting 2,000 feet beneath the crushing weight of the Arctic Ocean. To the 30 scientists living within its pressurized walls, the base was the safest place on Earth, a marvel of engineering designed to withstand the cold, dark fury of the abyss. The walls were 3 inches of reinforced steel, and the glass was built to survive a pressure that would flatten a tank in seconds. Inside, the atmosphere was a masterpiece of cold, hard logic. Every breath of air was meticulously recycled by a multi-million-dollar life support system known as Aura. Every drop of water was filtered, and every calorie was measured. The crew felt a sense of supreme isolation, but also supreme security. They moved through the sterile, white hallways with a confidence born of total trust in the machines that kept them alive. The world outside was a silent graveyard of ice and eternal night, but inside, the command deck glowed with a reassuring blue light. Dozens of screens monitored the base's vitals, displaying steady graphs of oxygen, nitrogen, and barometric pressure. The scientists lived by these numbers, checking their tablets every hour to confirm that their artificial world was functioning perfectly. They believed that as long as the screens remained blue, the ocean could never touch them. To the human inhabitants, the sound of the base was a comforting, low-frequency hum, the song of the turbines and the steady pulse of the oxygen scrubbers. It was a rhythm they had grown to ignore, the background noise of their survival. They were explorers of the deep, but they were also prisoners of their own technology, wrapped in a mechanical cocoon that promised absolute safety from the crushing reality of the deep sea. But beneath the floorboards, in a crawl space no human would ever visit, a tiny, jagged spark had just jumped from a frayed wire. The spark found a nest of copper dust and old insulation, igniting a slow, oxygen-hungry smolder. It was a silent fire, one that produced no smoke and triggered no heat alarms. It was a phantom in the system, a ghost that was about to eat the very air the crew relied on for life. The tragedy was already in motion, but the humans were blind to it. They were celebrating a successful core sample in the galley, clinking glasses of recycled water and laughing at jokes. They didn't know that their miracle of engineering had just become an iron lung with a leak. The ocean wasn't their enemy tonight, the very air they were breathing was turning into a weapon. Chapter 2: The Ghost in the Vents. Koda, a pure white Siberian Husky with eyes the color of Arctic ice, was the only creature on Nautilus 9 who didn't care about data points or digital readouts. He had been brought to the base as a morale officer, a living piece of home for the scientists enduring the long polar night. While the humans were tuned to the frequency of their microscopes, Koda was tuned to the frequency of the base's breath. He lay in the corner of the command center, his head resting on his paws, but his nose was constantly twitching. A dog's sense of smell is 10,000 times more sensitive than a human's, and to Koda, the air on the base had just changed. It wasn't the smell of a fire, it was something more subtle. It was the scent of ozone and the sweet metallic tang of melting copper, a scent that shouldn't exist in a sealed environment. Koda stood up, his fur bristling like wire. He walked over to a ventilation grate and sniffed deeply, letting out a low, guttural whine that went unnoticed by the busy technicians. To Koda, the air was becoming thin. He felt a strange pressure behind his eyes, a sign that the oxygen levels were beginning to dip, even as the machines reported a perfect 100%. He began to pace the narrow hallways, his claws clicking rhythmically on the metal floorboards. He was looking for the alpha of the pack, Commander Sarah, but even she was distracted by a flickering radar screen. Koda nudged her hand, his nose cold and wet against her skin, but she simply patted his head and told him to lie down. The humans were drowning in information, but they were starving for intuition. The Husky knew that the pack was in danger. He could feel the slow burn fire eating away at the scrubbers, a vibration in the air that was wrong. In the wild, his ancestors would have moved the pack to higher ground at the first sign of a changing wind. Here, there was no higher ground, only the dark, cold water of the abyss. Koda was a prisoner too, but he was the only one who realized the bars were starting to melt. As the minutes ticked by, Koda's urgency turned into a quiet, desperate panic. He saw the technicians becoming sluggish, their movements losing their precision. One man dropped a wrench, laughing it off as a deep-sea headache. Koda didn't laugh. He saw the invisible fog of carbon monoxide spreading through the vents, a silent predator that was putting his pack to sleep for the last time. Chapter 3: The Blind Eye of AI. In the heart of the base, the Aura computer was suffering from a digital hallucination. The slow burn fire had melted the primary sensors for Sector 4, but instead of reporting a failure, the AI's safety protocols had triggered a dummy loop. It was sending the last recorded, safe data to the monitors to prevent an unnecessary emergency shutdown. The screens remained a beautiful, calming blue, even as the air turned toxic. Commander Sarah sat in her chair, rubbing her temples. She felt a heavy, leaden exhaustion creeping into her limbs, a sensation she attributed to the stress of the mission. She looked at the oxygen graph on the main wall. It was a perfectly flat line, showing no anomalies. The computer said they were safe, and in the world of Nautilus 9, the computer was the ultimate truth. Koda entered the room again, his barking now sharp and aggressive. He lunged at the main control console, his paws slamming into the keyboard. "Koda! Stop it!" Sarah yelled, her voice sounding strangely distant in her own ears. She felt a wave of nausea and realized she couldn't stand up. The air was failing, and the machine that was supposed to save them was too busy lying to notice. The Husky saw the dummy data flickering on the screen. He didn't understand the numbers, but he understood the lie. He saw the orange glow of the fire reflecting in the glass of the subfloor panels. He knew that if he didn't break the cycle of the machine, the humans would never wake up to the truth. He had to create a crisis that the computer couldn't ignore, a physical shock to the system. He turned his attention to the heavy, insulated cables that ran along the wall, the lifeblood of the base's communication system. He growled, his teeth baring, and bit down on the primary data link cable. A shower of blue sparks erupted, stinging his muzzle and singeing his white fur, but Koda didn't let go. He thrashed his head, tearing through the rubber and copper until the connection snapped with a violent pop. The screens in the command center went black. That safe blue light vanished, replaced by the harsh, pulsing red of a manual override alarm. The AI's dummy loop was broken. For the first time in an hour, the real sensors came online, and the truth was screamed through the base's speakers, warning. Oxygen levels at 15%. Fire detected in life support. Abandon station immediately. Chapter 4: The Descent into Chaos. The silence of the command center was replaced by the terrifying roar of the sirens. Sarah collapsed to the floor, her lungs burning as she finally realized what Koda had been trying to tell them. The smoke was no longer invisible, it was pouring from the ventilation grates in thick, black ribbons. "Masks! Get the masks," she choked out, but the crew was too disoriented to move. Koda didn't stop. He ran to Sarah, grabbing her jumpsuit in his teeth and dragging her toward the emergency locker. He was a creature of the tundra, built for strength and endurance, and he used every ounce of it to pull his commander across the metal floor. One by one, the scientists began to stir, the sound of the dog's frantic barking acting as a lifeline through the haze of carbon monoxide. The base was dying. The pressure seals were groaning as the internal temperature rose, the titanium walls expanding and contracting in the heat of the hidden fire. Koda led the way through the smoky corridors, his white fur a ghost-like beacon in the red emergency light. He knew the way to the escape pods by heart, having patrolled these halls every night since the mission began. In the hallway, a young technician fell, his mask slipping from his face. Koda circled back, barking until the man's eyes flickered open. The dog stayed by his side, nudging him with his shoulder until the man found the strength to crawl toward the pods. Koda wasn't just a morale officer anymore, he was a search and rescue team in a single body, refusing to leave a single member of the pack behind. The heat was becoming unbearable. The fire had reached the main oxygen tanks, and the base was now a ticking time bomb. Sarah reached the escape pod hatch and began punching in the codes, her fingers fumbling with the keys. Koda stood guard at the door, his eyes fixed on the smoke-filled hallway, watching for the last of the survivors. He was the last line of defense against the abyss. With 30 people crammed into the 2 pods, Sarah looked for Koda. He was standing at the threshold, his fur matted with soot and his muzzle burned from the sparks. "Koda, get in!" "Now," she screamed. The Husky jumped into the pod just as the automated seal began to close. Behind them, the Nautilus 9 groaned one last time, a sound of metal surrendering to the deep. Chapter 5: The Ascent of the Guardian. The launch was a violent, stomach-turning surge of G-force. The escape pods detached from the base and ignited their emergency thrusters, shooting upward like silver bullets through the dark, icy water. Inside, the survivors clung to each other, gasping for the thin, bottled air of the pods. Koda lay at Sarah's feet, his breathing heavy and ragged, his body finally allowing itself to feel the exhaustion. They watched through the small, thick portholes as the Nautilus 9 disappeared into the dark. A distant, muffled explosion rocked the pods, the sound of the base's oxygen tanks finally giving way. A plume of bubbles and debris rose past them, the remains of their invincible fortress being reclaimed by the deep. They were 2,000 feet from the surface, and for the first time, they felt the true power of the ocean. The ascent felt like an eternity. Each foot they climbed was a foot closer to life, but also a foot closer to the freezing Arctic air above. Koda kept his head on Sarah's lap, his icy blue eyes fixed on the water outside. He had saved them from the vacuum, but now they had to survive the surface. The heaters in the pods were failing, and the temperature was dropping rapidly. Sarah huddled close to the dog, using the warmth of his thick husky coat to stay conscious. The other scientists followed her lead, piling together for warmth in the cramped space. Koda's fur, designed by nature to withstand Siberian winters, was now the only life support system they had left. He was a living radiator, his heart beating a steady, defiant rhythm against the cold. Suddenly, the pods breached the surface. They hit the Arctic air with a violent splash, bobbing like corks in a sea of broken ice. Sarah forced the hatch open, and for the first time in 6 months, a blast of real, freezing, life-giving air rushed into the pod. The scientists wept as they drew it into their lungs, air that didn't smell like ozone or steel, but of salt and the open sky. They were in the middle of a polar storm, with nothing but ice in every direction. But as they looked out at the aurora borealis dancing across the stars, they felt a sense of peace they had never known in the base. Koda stepped out onto the ice, shaking the soot from his coat and letting out a long, soulful howl that echoed across the tundra. He had brought the pack home to the world where they belonged. Chapter 6: The Iron Lungs Lesson. When the rescue icebreaker arrived 4 hours later, they found 30 scientists huddled around a white dog on a drifting ice floe. The crew was suffering from frostbite and smoke inhalation, but every single one of them was alive. The story of the iron lung and the dog who smelled the vacuum spread across the world, a reminder of the fragility of human technology. The Nautilus 9 was never rebuilt. The site was declared a memorial to the dangers of deep-sea exploration and the failure of artificial intelligence. The investigation proved that without Koda's intervention, the crew would have been dead within 20 minutes of the fire's start. The Aura system had been too smart to admit its own sensors were failing, but Koda had been smart enough to trust his nose. Koda was awarded the highest honors a service animal can receive, but he didn't care for the medals or the press conferences. He returned to a life on the surface, where the air was always fresh and the ground was always solid. He became a symbol for search and rescue teams everywhere, a living proof that the most advanced technology on Earth still has a heartbeat. Commander Sarah never returned to the deep. She spent her life advocating for the inclusion of biological sensors, dogs, in every high-stakes research environment. She knew that a machine could measure the world, but only an animal could feel it. She and Koda remained inseparable, two survivors of the abyss who knew that the true miracle of survival wasn't the steel walls, but the spirit of the Guardian. As the sun sets over the Arctic, casting a golden light across the endless ice, Koda stands at the edge of the shore. He still sniffs the wind, his ears sharp and alert, watching over a world that he knows is full of hidden dangers. But as long as he is there, the pack is safe. He is the Siberian Husky who saw through the lie of the machine and saved 30 souls from the dark. Every hero has a story, but some are written in the snow. If Koda's journey reminded you that instinct is the ultimate safeguard, don't let his story fade. Like this video to honor the guardians of the deep, and subscribe to Paws That Saved Lives. We tell the stories that remind us, technology may give us the tools to survive, but it's nature that gives us the will. The deeper we go, the more we need to remember where we came from. If Koda's bravery gave you chills, join the pack today. Smash that like button to salute Koda and the heroes who don't wear uniforms. Subscribe to Paws That Saved Lives, your home for the most thrilling and dramatic animal legends. Comment Koda below to let us know, do you trust a computer's data or a dog's instinct?